Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Able Voices podcast. I'm Dr. Rhoda Bernard, founding managing director of the Berklee Institute for Accessible Arts Education and the assistant chair of the music education department at Berklee College of Music. And I'm proud to present this podcast featuring disabled artists and arts educators. We are inviting artists with disabilities to be guest hosts for the Able Voices podcast. Today's guest host is Ben Lunn. Ben Lunn is a music composer, conductor, musicologist, teacher, and associate artist for Drake Music and Drake Music Scotland. As a composer, Lunn's music reflects the material world around him, connecting his Northeastern heritage or how disability impacts the world around him or his working class upbringing. Alongside this, he has become renowned for his championship of others, which have seen him creating unique collaborations with musicians from across the globe and developing unique concert experiences and opportunities for others. He has won accolades from the Scottish Music Awards in both 2023 and 2020 for his work with Hebrides Ensemble and Drake Music Scotland. In 2022, Ben became the first Northeast composer to be selected for the Royal Philharmonic Society's Composer Scheme, which sees him paired with music in the round. As a musicologist, Lunn specializes in Baltic music, Horatiu, Radulescu, political ideology and composition, and composing and disability. He has had the honor of lecturing at some of the world's leading academic institutions, and his articles have been published across Germany, UK, US, Russia, Lithuania, and collected by the Arvo Hat Centre. In 2021, Ben also helped found the Disabled Artists Network, an organization which is bridging the gap between the professional world and disabled artists.
Hello, I am Ben Lunn. I'm a composer based in Scotland, and it is my pleasure to be once again being the guest host for Able Voices, where I have been introducing and talking to a variety of wonderful disabled musicians and composers from across Britain. And it is my absolute pleasure to introduce a really wonderful colleague and friend of mine called Sarah Lianne Lewis. So before we do that, we're going to hear a small excerpt of a piece by Sarah as a nice, wonderful introduction to her music. So let's have a listen. So, Sarah, could you tell us a little bit about that particular piece we've just heard?
So that piece is a piece for solo piano that I wrote, commissioned by Drake Music Scotland back in 2023. And it's called Letting the Light In. The idea being it sort of sums up this woozy, sleep-addled kind of sense where that summer that I wrote it, I'd just had my firstborn son and I was incredibly sleep deprived, and it was sort of I suppose, a reflection on motherhood, but through the lens of what my kind of exhaustion was kind of pre-existing as well. I've got ME, which is myalgic encephalomyelitis, which is quite a mouthful to say when you've got brain fog half the time. But basically, like, exhaustion and sleep deprivation is quite often a part of my daily kind of experience. And the kind of the toll of the early days of postpartum kind of, I suppose, kind of expounded that a little bit. It was so much more. But there was a real beauty to that, seeing those kind of tiny moments in the dark nights and having that hope and just awe of this tiny little human being. Kind of just, I think it created something very beautiful, and I tried to create that beauty in the piece. And I sort of created some different sounds. So there's these almost kind of gamelan, kind of gong bell sounds that are created through some kind of extended techniques, as you'd call them, where I weave a coin in between three of the piano strings. And it's quite a kind of light preparation. It's very subtle, but it changes the sound world of the piece to be familiar yet kind of unusual and unfamiliar at the same time.
Wonderful. For those who don't know Sarah, she's been particularly modest as this particular piece as well won a very fancy prize. Do you want to tell people about what that prize was?
Yeah, it won the Royal Philharmonic Society Award for Chamber Scale Composition this year, which was a little bit of a pinch me moment, to say the least. I think I definitely gawped at you and Jack, my husband, sitting next to me for a good couple of seconds before I was pushed, saying, "You've got to go up on stage." But no, that was a lovely accolade, actually, to kind of encourage me that something that I felt was quite a small, introspective, quiet piece resonated with people enough that it won that award. It's a really prestigious award, and I think I might be the first Welsh person to have won as well. I know several of people have been shortlisted, but I think I might be the first Welsh person to have won, at least in the last 25 years since the awards are what they are now.
We'll have to do some digging, because I remembered.
I know.
I'm in a similar situation where I'm the first composer from the Northeast England to be ever commissioned by the Royal Philharmonic Society as well. So I'm glad we're both causing havoc for that organisation together.
Yay!
So to rewind a little bit, I imagine everyone will be very, very interested to how you got from just your initial interest in music to becoming this wonderful, internationally recognised, award-winning composer. How was that sort of journey, finding music and then coming into composition?
Wow. I mean, I think music was kind of part of my life quite naturally. I grew up in a family where they were all very keen amateur music making people, and I just kind of played piano, sang around the house, and just sort of absorbed kind of lots of different musics. My dad was really into kind of the 70s Led Zeppelin and kind of 70s classics, like kind of Camel as well, which is quite a prog kind of interesting indie rock. And then my mum was into kind of Mozart and the more traditional classical music. And so I had those as soundtracks on long car journeys around the house and on the weekends. And it was a time where there was, I think, a greater access to music education as well. We had free music lessons in schools. It was easy to be able to learn instruments because it was just offered. Instruments were cheap or rented to you for a very small amount of money. And I learnt piano first, and then went to violin and started being in kind of the school orchestra, the county orchestra, and then sort of went from there. And then all of that alongside singing too. And I think I took it for granted at the time. I think it was only when I went to university and I told people about what our Christmas tradition was that I realised it's quite an unusual family to grow up in. And bear in mind, I went to a school of music in university. I felt that, there'll surely be people who are as nerdy as I am. Apparently, not many people are nerdy enough to sing extracts of Handel's Messiah at Christmas with their family. 4-part harmony too. Yeah. So that was my Christmas. Every year, almost without fail, we'd sing extracts of Handel's Messiah. And then I was really busy, quite often through school. I would have, I think almost every lunchtime, every after school was some sort of music group. And if it wasn't groups that already existed, myself and friends set up our own groups. So we had a cerddant, which competes in the Welsh Eisteddfodau, which, for those who don't know, the Welsh Eisteddfod is this kind of local and national kind of arts competition, community celebration. And there's lots of different categories like arts and music, singing, composition. And it's just this incredible celebration of Welsh culture and Welsh song and music. It's brilliant. So we were part of that, and we even set up a recorder group to compete there in the chamber music. So as a young teenager, I was super busy with all of this music making, and yeah, I took it for granted until I got glandular fever at the age of 17. And I had to effectively drop out of school for 6 months. And suddenly I was even just kind of going up and down stairs to be able to have a meal was an effort, let alone thinking about doing anything musical. I didn't play or sing for months and months and months on end. And it was really hard to actually get back into it. My music teacher, my school music teacher, was incredible. And instead, when I started going back to school, they thought it was just a virus to begin with. They didn't realize there were more repercussions to it. And when I started back at school, I'd missed all of my AS level exams, which are kind of the year before you graduate school. And at the time, they're quite important. They kind of add about 50% of the overall mark of the grades that you get leaving school. And I'd missed most of those. The only one I'd managed to sit was actually my music exam. I think because it was the easier one. The music came naturally. And actually listening to music and doing that part of it was almost, I wouldn't say restful, but it's not the same as writing a history essay. um, but school looked very different for me when I came back for the final year. I did as much out of school as possible. I had to do a lot of catch up. And I also had to deal with some teachers really not understanding what it was to not be able to be a fully functioning teenager. And, I'd have comments not just from friends or people who didn't know me, but kind of, oh, I've been bunking off. Oh, I'm just putting it on for attention. Or, oh, she doesn't want to sit that exam, so she's found an excuse. And those are the teachers as well, kind of saying those things. But my music teacher was incredible. She saw that actually it was too much for me to keep going to school to do the music lessons with everyone. And she took it on herself to teach me after school on Fridays, an hour a week. And we covered all of the syllabus that would ordinarily be covered in, I think, about 9 hours over a fortnight. We covered in 2 hours a fortnight and more. We got to explore kind of more of what I was interested in music. And whilst it was a struggle for me realizing my health was not quite as well, it's never been as well as it was previous to the glandular fever. I really look back at that time and realize how special it was to have that time with my music teacher and do the syllabus in a way that I connected with it, that I got to explore composers like Berg. I found his violin concerto and I just fell in love with it. And my music teacher, we wouldn't have been able to do this if we were in a class of like 20 kids. she wouldn't have been able to say, right, we're going to spend like a week on this. We're going to watch this DVD of it. We're going to find out a little bit more about him. But because it was one-on-one quite often, I was able to do that. And so I think that really instilled this love and this kind of hunger and understanding of kind of newer music, kind of in the 20th century and forward. And I think that probably formed the basis of me wanting to study music at university too. Yeah.
Wonderful. And so there are many threads to pull on in that. And so you sort of touched on it a little bit with sort of obviously the nature of a disability that's evolving is always a very interesting one, sort of how we relate to it. So like with myself, I've all my sort of conscious life I've been autistic and I've known about it. Whereas my physical disabilities now are a much more recent thing. So there was a process of sort of accommodating that. And so I'm sort of curious sort of how you found that particular process of sort of say coming to terms with that while also doing the creative things and also having to navigate the really problematic elements of the work that surrounds us, namely people not really understanding at all what we're like.
Yeah. Oh God. I think I was awful to myself, actually, because I thought everyone else was saying, oh, you'll get better, you'll get better. And oh, it's only going to be a short period of time, just kind of everyone is expecting me to get back to normal, to be able to kind of go back into everything I'd done previous, to be able to do as well as I had done previously. And I tried. Um, Probably, well, definitely to the detriment of my health. It took me a long time, and I'm really embarrassed about this now, and I regret a lot of things, but I didn't want to label myself as disabled. I think a lot of people didn't see me as disabled because I looked healthy to the most part. And I found that people treated me different if I said I can't do something because I don't have the energy. I also didn't have the terminology, I think, to explain how it was different for me. And so I actually really struggled through the first year of university without any help because I didn't know where to find the help. It perhaps wasn't as signposted as clearly as it could have been, but also that there just wasn't maybe an understanding that possibly because I wasn't being as vocal about my needs as I could have been, because I feared any repercussions of not being included in ensembles or choirs because they would see my limitations and not see further than that. And I think it was only in the second year I'd been severely ill by the end of the first year. I was pretty much bedbound again. For the better part of that summer, I'd been accepted into the National Youth Choir of Wales. I had to drop out because I was so ill. And for the better part of, probably about 8 to 10 weeks, I could barely do anything. And I thought, I can't go back to university like this. Something has to change. And so my parents are brilliant, and we found that there was actually something called like student support services. And I felt like I didn't look disabled enough or didn't feel disabled enough to warrant the help. But actually it was, when I got that help, it was like a weight off my shoulders. They were able to put kind of really small, simple things in place that meant I was able to do better work. They provided me with note takers for my lectures because part of ME means that I have a significant amount of brain fog on a day-to-day basis. And quite often it's the combination of trying to listen, but also trying to focus enough to write is very, very difficult. And I mean, nowadays, if I'm in meetings, I tend to kind of record them on my phone so I can listen back and take notes afterwards. But it's very difficult for me to kind of do the two things at once, which seemed very normal for everyone else to be able to do. And the early starts were very difficult. So it meant that note takers would turn up whether or not I was there and support me by producing notes that I could read. And They provided me with kind of a book allowance so that I wouldn't have to trek to the library each time I needed to get a book out. And they provided some transport costs as well, so that if there were concerts that I needed to get across the city for, that I wouldn't feel like, oh, I've got to walk there or I've got to catch a bus. I'd be able to afford a taxi to get me from start to finish as easily with as little energy used as possible. And it was like little things like that that really helped. And they thought through the accessibility aspect of where these things are. For instance, the computer lab in the music department is on the third floor of the building, and it's quite a trek up those stairs. And it's also very, very hot or very, very cold, like two extremes of temperatures. Again, part of the ME is I don't deal well with extremes of temperatures. My body kind of doesn't cope very well. And so I felt it was so extravagant at the time, but it honestly helped me complete my degrees. They provided me with a computer with Sibelius, and I would just felt like the jammiest person to have got this equipment. But I don't think I would have been able to do as well as I was in being able to be creative and be able to still do the essays and everything if I actually hadn't had that equipment that they'd provided me with, that I felt like I didn't deserve. And so that kind of help support my studies for the most part. And I still, at that point, still refused any help during exams. I thought I could still cope with them. Silly me, really. And it was actually only after my second year, I think, where I actually had to walk out of an exam because I just couldn't cope with the environment, and I was exhausted. And I think I completed maybe 50% of the paper before I thought, I can't do this. I just felt like I was going to cry. And I could see everyone else around me just coping and furiously writing away. And I was just thinking, I'm exhausted. It hurts my hands to just write at the moment. My brain fog is so bad. And I just thought, I can't do this. And so I think about an hour and a half into a 3-hour history exam, I just stood up and left. And I thought, I can't do exams. I've got to figure something out. Turns out there was support for that too. And I'm so annoyed at myself that I didn't take that particular part of the help up sooner, because there was such a marked difference in my grades between the second and the third year when I actually had help in the third year. And when I say help, it wasn't they were sitting there writing the exam papers for me. It was they provided a quieter environment. They provided a chair that wasn't uncomfortable for me to sit in. They provided, I think it was something like every half hour I was allowed a 5-minute break if I needed it. And I could build up those 5-minute breaks. If it was a 3-hour exam, I could build it up so I had like 20 to 30 minutes I could take if I wanted to take it as a chunk to like lie down and rest. And I just remember going into those exams, and there were only maybe 10, 20 people in the room at any one time doing an exam. Quite often they weren't doing the same exam as I was. And I just remember feeling, I can do this at that point, feeling this is an environment where I feel safe to be able to do my work and do it to the best of my ability without being, looking up in the amount of brain fog I would have, looking up and having these like exam invigilators just glaring at me and kind of saying, head down. And instead, there were maybe 2-3 exam invigilators in the room, and they would just, it sounds really silly and so small, but they would smile. And I was like, okay, I can do this. They're not like these people saying, why aren't you working? And it helped so much. And then for my master's, I didn't have any exams, which was great. It was all coursework based. But yes, I wish I'd taken up the student support offer much earlier than I did. I think that would have completely transformed my experience of my degree, because I was determined to struggle and try to be oh gosh, normal as much as possible because I looked normal. And it just got tiring to explain to people, oh, I can't do that, I've got ME. And then all the questions of, why do you have it? How long have you had it? What does that stop you doing? Oh, okay, we won't ask you to do this thing. And feeling suddenly like you're kind of put in this box where there are these limitations placed on you without your permission, and feeling like it's a lot harder to break out of that box then, if that makes any
Aye,
sense.
aye, yeah. And so one thing, well, sort of a few things come to me mind with all of this. Is one, there's a wonderful book by Leonard Davis called Enforcing Normalcy. And there's just this wonderful element in the book where he talks about how with disability, it's one of those things of if you can't see it, you presume it's not there. But once you see it, you then don't see it you can't see anything else beyond this.
Yeah.
And so that sort of my time in university was sort of similar in many ways, but also it had its own different kinds of chaos. So like even though I'd entered university knowing all the things I should have had access to, my institution failed to give me that for a variety of reasons, both internal problems, but also I don't want to name names of individuals because who knows, hopefully they'll employ us at some point in the future for things. But that then meant that even though I knew what I should have had access to, it wasn't there.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, because I was at a music college for both my bachelor's and my master's, it was much more relaxed, much more chilled. It was purely coursework. I did not have to do any recitals. It was lovely. It was manageable. But I also was going through that same kind of process of not necessarily wanting to take ownership of being disabled. At that point, this was particularly prominent around my late teenage years, early 20s, because essentially there was that great fear of typecasting, namely as, you're the autistic one, we'll give you the nice autistic thing. We won't let you work with the orchestra, we'll give you the ASN kids and all this other kind of stuff and not actually envisage you are able to do anymore. And so there was that sort of a sense of shame that came with it, but as over time, it's just addressed it very differently. And it also got to a point where it's like, I can't hide it anymore. But that's a whole different story. So yeah, and it is also just very interesting, particularly as you're only just around the corner from us while you're going through all of this, and we're both having these fun events.
Probably around the same time, actually.
Well, exactly, because I was only a year behind you, like so. Even though, because as my course was 4 years, I finished sort of graduated 2 years later than you, but I was only 1 year behind. Bye. So we've waffled enough about past. I'm sort of curious, what things are you working on at the minute? I'm sure people listening in will be very curious to hear what sort of pieces you're writing at the minute.
Gosh, quite a wide variety. So I've just finished working with the Philharmonia Orchestra in London. I wrote a piece for kind of Sinfonietta lineup. So that was premiered as part of their Music of Today series back in June, and it'll be released on NMC Recordings in October this year, I think. I don't know the absolute date, but around October time. So that's very exciting. And yeah, that piece sort of followed on from Letting the Light in terms of it's still a reflection on motherhood, but it's talking the music, I suppose, is reflecting and kind of trying to explore the idea of motherhood and kind of reflects, I think, feelings that I've been exploring about how my disabilities and conditions have impacted what my interpretation of motherhood is. How one of the autoimmune conditions I have has affected a lot of pregnancies that I've had. So I've had recurrent pregnancy loss because of a condition that I've only recently found out about that I've had for a while, called antiphospholipid syndrome. So that was a really hard piece to write, but I think it kind of did me good to write it, if that makes sense. I think sometimes when we write music, we can write really joyful music, we can write music that's kind of not got any context to like parts of our personal lives, but for me, a lot of my music is wrapped up in personal stuff. you could probably go through my back catalogue and just be like, oh yeah, that happened then, that happened then, that happened then, just by seeing kind of program notes and kind of working out what my pieces are about. But I think it's just, I don't know, writing music is kind of free therapy of processing stuff sometimes for me. And so yeah, that was a big piece that I spent a lot of time on over this past autumn and spring. I'm currently finishing a piece for harpsichord, which is really exciting. I've never written for harpsichord before, and so I've learned a lot about that. So yeah, that's been a really interesting project, and that'll be premiered in October in Hay-on-Wye. And then I'm just about to put the last dots to the notes and send it off. A score for the shortlist of the Composers Medal in the Eisteddfod. So I've been shortlisted for the Composers Medal, which is probably one of, if not the most prestigious Welsh music prize for composers in Wales. And you kind of look through those who've won the Composers Medal, which I'm using the English term, it's Medal y Cyfansoddwr, which means literally Composers Medal. And it's everyone who's won it is literally a who's who of Welsh composers. It's amazing. And it's amazing to just even be part of the shortlist. So yeah, that's a string trio that reflects on Welsh culture and identity in the face of losing a language, and how sometimes kind of memory, speech, and music is tied up together, and how it can be triggered, like a memory can be triggered by music. So I think those are the projects I've kind of got at the moment or just finished.
Awesome. And so, like with the I said for colleagues of mine from other settings will be down for it. So, like one of the newspapers I regularly write for, the Morning Star, they go down to the I said forth, and then they are the only national paper in Britain that does a special edition of the Morning Star in Welsh. So you can get no other paper in Britain does that, does a translated edition of the paper for the I said forth. So they'll be down with the arts and culture stuff. So that sounds like a really fun celebration of it, and
yeah,
a very timely and important topic as well, looking at sort of Welsh identity and so on. And it's also, this is where sort of coming from the northeast of England, it's really infuriating because our culture is as ancient as Welsh culture, but because we were an industrial part of England, we're kind of overlooked, despite the fact that the only British person mentioned in Dante's Inferno was a lad from down the road from where I was born. But now we're not treated as seriously as anything else.
Wow. Yeah.
Funny old world, but they're really wonderful projects, and I'm also very excited to hear the Philharmonia piece when that comes out on NMC recordings as well. I'm sure everyone else listening in to this now as well will also be just as excited. Yeah. So I appreciate sort of I've stolen a lot of your time, and particularly when we both have various different kind of fatigue problems. Half an hour is much more than half an hour in various different problems. So it's
easy nice talking to you, though.
Likewise, but still, the ramifications of losing half an hour is much bigger than anyone else's half an hour. So as a nice sort of rounding off, is there any sort of bits of advice you'd like to give, say, young artists who are disabled, either say with ME or other kinds of disabilities, or just young artists wanting to enter into the world?
I think, gosh, for those especially with a disability, whether it's seen or hidden, find the person or people that's safe to talk to and to ask for kind of support, whether that be organisations like things like student support services if you're in or the equivalent for universities, but also if you're going through any kind of artist development schemes as well, which quite often are kind of seen, I suppose, as alongside university or just immediately post university as you're embarking on a career. They quite often historically haven't been as aware of kind of additional needs, be it accessibility needs like on a physical level, but also things like kind of if you've got caregiving responsibilities as well, those can be often overlooked. But and I will actually hold the Philharmonia up as an example. They were amazing. and Linda, who was the program manager for the Composers Academy. She was incredible. So as well as the ME and coping with that on a daily basis, I'm a parent of a young child, and she identified that I needed certain things in place for me to be able to do my best work. And that was kind of through having conversations with me, both at application stage and after I accepted the place. And it was done in a really gentle kind of, we want you to do your best work. What can we do to help you? It wasn't me having to ask for things. I just mentioned, this is stuff I'm living with. And they said, we want you with all of that stuff. We want you. How can we make it easier for you to turn up? And they were amazing, and they just championed all of that. And I felt really supported, and to be able to turn up and be both a mother and a disabled artist and be able to do work in a really supportive environment and be kind of like maybe a slightly kind of boss composer in the room. And it felt really empowering to actually have that support behind me from the start. And if I was having a really bad day with my ME, they'd, just as part of the course, they provided a quiet room at every single venue for me to be able to go to, and gave me space and time to be able to do that. In rehearsals, I'd sometimes get like a quiet text from Linda saying, if you want to go out now, I'll make you a cup of tea, go out, find a quiet space, and I'll let you know when you've got to come back in. And so having that reminder of like, I need to look after myself to be able to be as present and as capable as I can be really helped. So I think sometimes we still need to ask for things because people don't have the awareness of, and also being disabled, it's not a kind of one size fits all. We all have wildly different accessibility needs. So one thing that works for one person doesn't work for the other. So knowing, I think it has also helped me to put kind of an access rider together of what helps me to do my best work and what people can do to help me. So that really helps. There's lots of examples online of disability access riders. So I'd recommend anyone to kind of look those up and use them as a template for your own needs. I think probably there is a fair amount of stubbornness as well. I think you get used to rejection when you apply for things, and it's a case of brush yourself down, pick yourself up, and know that that's a subjective evaluation of your work. And if you truly believe in your work, there'll be somewhere and someone who also believes in it. And it's kind of connecting with those people. And sometimes I think that can take a while to find. But when you found your people, again, you can do your best work, which is just really freeing. Yeah, I think maybe that's advice, thoughts, reflections.
That's a really beautiful way to sort of round off our chat. Thank you very much there, Sarah.
You're welcome.
And thank you very much, everyone who has listened in to Able Voices podcast. I'm Ben Lunn, and it's been my pleasure to introduce you to the wonderful people I've been able to chat to these past 3 sessions. So thank you very much, and look forward to hopefully chatting to more people in the future. All the best.
Able Voices is a production of the Berklee Institute for Accessible Arts Education, led by me, Dr. Rhoda Bernard, the founding managing director. It is produced by Daniel Martinez del Campo. The intro music is by Kai Levin, and our closing song is by Sebastian Batista. Kai and Sebastian are students in the arts education programs at the Berklee Institute for Accessible Arts Education. If you would like to learn more about our work, find us online at berkeley.edu/BIAAE or email us at BIAAE@berkeley, that's LEE.edu.